So I'm very excited today to spend some time with Lula Bom, who is a beloved member of St. Luke's, who sadly has left us recently for the Dallas area, but we miss her terribly. And we're so glad that we have a little time to spend with her today. But again, just another conversation about race and grace and where God fits in all that is happening right now. But Lula, maybe to start, would you kind of like to introduce yourself for those who don't know you?
Yes, for those who don't know me, I'm Lula Bom, long time St. Luke member until recently, 3 months ago. But I still feel like I'm part of St. Luke. So, it's been 3 months, but I've been going to St. Luke's for a very long time. I miss you guys, and I'm in Dallas now. So it's me.
We miss you too. So how have you been experiencing both the pandemic, but then as this other layer is now on top of it, with just this deep disturbance in our national psyche and politics and life that has a racial dimension to it? What is that experience like for you in your heart and mind? What would you like to share with us today?
Topic of race is something that's, even in my job, in my work, people are talking about it. They want your opinion on certain topics. But for me, prayers again. God, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know if the next person could be my brother. The next person could be a family member. But God, I ask for protection, because as us Africans that come to America or that live in America, we are now part of this country. And when a police pulls you over, they're not going to be able to distinguish between you're Sudanese or you're African American, you're Black. So now we're part of this community, and these issues also directly affect us as well. So to see something like that happen and get that international attention, make me kind of think about my own family. I have cousins, brothers. I mean, what if that was somebody that I know? So these issues are now become our issues, part of our community, because we are part of that community. So,
would you be willing to share a little bit more about some of those different identities that you just listed? Because I think for some people, they haven't thought through maybe some of those distinctions between African American, Black American, Sudanese, and how that plays out. Like you said, in some ways, people aren't paying attention to those distinctions, but how are they important to you, and what do they mean to you?
I mean, race is one of those things. Maybe when we came to America, it wasn't something that we were thinking about. We came here thinking, okay, we have our own struggles that we're dealing with. We came to this country seeking better opportunities because we had a lot of hardship, things that we're dealing with, as most of you guys know, wars and a lot of things that we're dealing with. I think race wasn't one of the things that we thought about as one of the challenges that we'll be facing, because coming to America as a Sudanese, as a refugee from African country, I think most of us don't think about our color being one of the obstacles or difficulties that we have to deal with living here. So once you come to this country, you're automatically put in a category, oh, you're African or African American now. And you're like, what? But okay, well, you're in that category now. So now that you're part of that community, then you have to face the same challenges these communities are having. Because I honestly believe if I was a refugee from European country, my experience would be different if I was a white person as a refugee. But since you're Black now, or whatever other minority groups, then you are automatically put in that group, then you're facing the same challenges as that group. So a person that's a white person might see me, they can't tell the difference. You're African, Haitian, or Caribbean, you're Black. So you're in the same category, and all that stereotypes and all the negativity associated with that, you are a part of it. You're not exempt, So new sets of challenges that you have to deal with, conversations that we never had to talk about before because it was never an issue. But now, it was never a conversation that our parents had to talk to us about, because it's not, it was nothing that was relevant from where we came from. But now we live in this new country, new challenges, new conversations that need to be, that need to happen. So.
Yeah. And I forget, how old were you when you came to the US?
I came here when I was 15.
Okay.
a teenager. Mm-hmm.
So do you remember like kind of the dawning sort of realization of what American blackness meant? And as you start to kind of reflect on it now, is it like what are the sort of gifts of it and what are sort of its constraints? I don't know if you've had much time to think of that about that before, or if it's a helpful question, but
I mean, first thing you notice is when you fill out an application, what race are you? And you're like, what are the options? Oh, I'm African, but there's no African option here. You're put, yeah, African American, or you automatically put in one category. They're giving you new identity. I'm an African that lives in America, because an African American is someone's from here. Maybe some of us might, maybe you identify as an African American, but also as an African, where do they put you in a category? So that itself, and again, being an African American, you have challenges that you deal with. Or even being an African, when you are around African Americans, they can tell that you're not one of them. You speak different. You don't speak English. And then there you are around white people, other people, they can tell, well, you're Black. So you don't really kind of fit in any of the categories because you're not really African American, but you're still Black, So that identity in itself, you have the challenges that you have to deal with. So
I imagine it would just be complicated because then, at least from the outside perspective, people assume that you sort of fit within the whole African American story and its history too. And so then, let's say a really important part of what's happening right now, and many have been saying this for decades and centuries, but maybe white folks are starting to actually hear this, has been this 400-year story of oppression that, it's not like 8 minutes and 46 seconds of someone on your neck. It's like 400 years worth. But then like you're supposed to now kind of enter into this history that's not yours. I mean, there's obviously your own history of related oppression. I don't know, that must just be kind of a weird space to be in too.
I mean, we understand the challenges that our brothers and sisters, our African American brothers and sisters, are going through. I mean, colonization. They're part of. They're our people as well. They came from us, but again, that history, of course, is different. And a lot of us, and I can't speak on behalf of everyone, but most of us that came from outside, like from African countries, we're not taught the history. So we didn't come here knowing the history of like African Americans and what they've gone through, the system and how it affected their life. We don't know that. Most of us didn't learn that coming here. We didn't know. If we knew what they went through, at least some of us would understand, okay, now that I'm facing these challenges and I understand why things happened the way they happened because of the history. But a lot of us that come from like African countries, we're not taught, these challenges, we're not taught the history. So then sometimes some of us can't relate because we don't know, but now some of us that have been here long enough, we can relate. We understand now. We were taught these are the challenges they go through, and it's been 400 years, and we know how the system operates now. We know why Black men are in prison. We know, knowing now we're like, okay, wow, okay, now I understand. I can at least relate some of these things. So not knowing in itself kind of makes it difficult to relate to the African American community. And I know sometimes that topic comes up where there's a gap between the African American community and the African community, so just not knowing. And now most of us that live here know, and we can, relate to these issues.
And then, regardless of how sort of one understands or relates to that history, the outsider sort of perspective still kind of puts you in the same category. And there's many at St. Luke young people who have been justice involved, who have been victims of racist acts and that have really affected their lives, right? Like their educational careers at St. Luke's, even though some weren't even born in this country, others, are still kind of pretty new to the whole American experience. But in some ways it doesn't matter. That's like American racial power is such that it sort of just like says, okay, if you're in this category, guess what? You get to experience like all that goes with that, you know, without really
Exactly.
be part of that, you know?
Exactly. Like you didn't sign up for it, but here, you know, yeah, that's part of it, basically. Yeah. Yeah. Not easy.
Are there any notes of hope in what's happening right now for you? How do you what is your sort of longer term thinking about what happens next, and where God maybe fits in?
Trusting the Lord, you know, that verse always comes up in my, like, trusting the Lord with all my heart and not leaning on our understanding, because this is a time of uncertainty and fear and anger. And God, what is happening? What do you want us to do? You know, and as a Christian and a believer, how should I react to this? It's injustice. What do I say? Do I lash out and say things that are very negative that would affect my faith? Or should I just be peaceful and not do anything? God, how do I go? How do I guess it's asking for direction. What do I do? You know, and not, one thing is just not to lean on our own understanding, but God knows your intentions. And for me, hope would be just praying and say, God, I know there's a lot happening right now, but I know you're able to make changes. God, if I can survive civil wars, if I can survive difficulties and hardship, if I can survive being a refugee in a country that's foreign, if I can survive all of these challenges, I know I can survive this as well. You know, so that is looking back and how far we've come. So,
well, that's one of the things that was most striking in my conversation with Catherine, that she was saying that friends and family in Sudan, where there's still war happening, are calling and saying, hey, we're praying for you. Are you all right? Like, they're worried about you, you know? Kind of give some of that global context. And then in a conversation I had earlier this week with Yar, it was interesting to hear her kind of talk through like her Christian identity and what it meant to sort of love her neighbor right now, while juggling sort of the anger, the desire to like say your piece in it all. If nothing else, just in response to what's happening. I don't know. Do you feel any kind of tension? Like, what does it mean to love your neighbor right now?
I don't feel any tension. I don't. I really don't. Loving your neighbor is just like God said. Whatever that you do, it always reminded me of that one time when I even saw a meme, like when Jesus said, when, you know, when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I didn't have clothes, and they're like, God, when did we do? You know, we didn't do that. He said, when you do to the least people, you're doing it as well, like Jesus. So same thing. It's like, I'm not gonna go out and be awful to my neighbor just because there's a lot of tension. I'm not gonna do that, because what's the point? You know, love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. Even if my neighbor does not like me because I'm Black. that's what Christianity is all about. People didn't like Jesus. They didn't like him. You know, he was different, and he was all about justice and peace. He was not liked either, and he still preached about loving, even when he died, even when he was on the cross. He asked that God, you know, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing, to that point. You know, and I'm not asking that everyone to do that, but that's like, again, that identity of being a Christian. It will take a lot of all of us to make change, but also let's not forget who we are, believers, and our God is victorious God. So
Thank you. That's a good reminder.
yeah.
There's a lot of well-meaning white folks out there like myself that are curious about the appropriate role for us to play in all this, and just kind of what do we do next? Like, what are our responsibilities now? Do you have anything to say? It's totally cool if you don't, but any advice for well-meaning white folks in all this?
Be supportive. Just be supportive. If you hear someone venting about the things that's happening, just be supportive. If you don't have anything that's supportive, you can refrain from saying things. Don't say, I agree with you, but there's no but. Just be supportive. Because right now people don't want to hear but. They don't want to hear that. So just be as much as just be as supportive as you're able to be, and be kind and understanding. That's what people need right now. Just be understanding and make people feel like, okay, I'm with you. We can do this together. So, you know.
Thank you. That's helpful. Anything else you'd like to add or talk about today?
No, just continue praying. Just continue praying. God knows what He's done.
Come, Lord Jesus. Speaking of prayer, would you offer a final prayer for us?
Okay. All right. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for this conversation. Lord, I pray that we are able to touch hearts and maybe change minds and bring us closer, God. Thank you for communication, for communities and people that are willing to listen and people that want to make change. God, just give us the ability to work together and bring peace among all your people. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you again, Lula. This is a blessing.
You're welcome. All right. You're welcome.